You can connect your Modular X to your computer by using the USB computer port at the back of the Modular X and connect a USB cable from the Modular X to your computer. The next thing that you'll need to do is access the graphical user interface using a web browser. You can use any web browser of your choice, but it is recommended to use Google Chrome. To access the web browser, you can simply type the following web address. Be sure to save this particular web address as a bookmark for easy access the next time you'd like to access the user interface. When the module has successfully connected with the computer, the interface should look like this. If the Modular X requires a new firmware update, there will be a notification on your computer screen. Click through the instructions and download the new firmware update. Once the firmware update process is completed, the Modular X will restart and the web GUI will reload with the current pedal board that's on the Modular X. First of all, let's get familiar with all the information that's being displayed. At the bottom of the screen, you have access to all of the modules that you can use to create pedal boards. These are sorted out in categories, starting with your favorites, a category of all modules available, control voltage modules, delay modules, distortion modules, dynamics modules, filter modules, generator modules, MIDI utility modules, modulators, reverbs, amp simulators, spatial modules, spectral modules, and finally utility modules. Now let's take a look at the bottom left icons in the web browser, starting with the pedalboard library. The pedalboard library contains all pedal boards that have been created and are available for you to transfer to your Modular X or are already residing on your Modular X. The Banks section allows you to organize your pedal boards to be transferred to your Modular X. If you find that you're missing a particular plugin module, the plugin store is where you can browse all the current available plugins for you to either purchase or immediately download. In the bottom right-hand section of icons, we have a tempo section, a MIDI port section, the ability to bypass both input 1 and input 2. We have CPU and RAM monitoring, and a settings screen with basic and advanced parameters as well as device updates. The top right icons allow me to manage the CV ports, create snapshots, create new pedal boards, save pedal boards or save versions of pedal boards, and share pedal boards. In the far right corner, there's also a magnifying icon that allows you to zoom in or zoom out of your pedal board. Now let's take a look at the inputs and outputs of the Modular X represented in the web browser. The audio signal flows from left to right. On the left-hand side, the purple cables represent the audio input. The blue cable represents the MIDI input, and the three orange cables represent the expression pedal or CV inputs. On the right-hand side, we have all corresponding outputs. I currently have an FX pedal board loaded up in my web browser. I love the sound of it, but I'd like to add an additional reverb to it. I'm going to go to my reverb section and drag and drop a plate reverb into the pedal board area. When I play the sequence from my synthesizer, I can hear that the pedal board is adding a delay effect to the sound. As soon as I drag the reverb in, I can see that the reverb is not connected to the signal chain, so I'm going to have to make some modifications to my pedal board. To do this, I'm going to have to disconnect the signal flow and redirect it through the pedal board. Now I've inserted the reverb plugin module in between the stereo crossfade and the modulate. Now when I adjust the parameters of the reverb, you can clearly hear it taking effect in this pedal board. So now you've seen how easy it is to add plugin modules to your current pedal board. Let's go ahead and add one more. This time I'm going to choose a dynamic effect, a compressor. I'll add the compressor to this current pedal board simply by disconnecting the Shiro modulate and inserting the compressor into the signal flow. I'll make some small adjustments to the compressor so that now the two effect sounds are a little bit more smoothened out and balanced in the mix. So the next thing I'd like to do is adjust the parameters from the new plugins directly from the Modular X. To do this, I'll click on the cogwheel above the plugin I wish to map. I'll select the parameter that I wish to map to the Modular X and click on the icon that looks like the faders on a mixer. By selecting the tab Device, I now have access to all the knobs and buttons so that I can map that particular parameter to any of the vacant buttons or knobs I choose. I'll select another parameter and follow the same procedure. So now that I've added the new plugin modules to the pedal board and mapped the parameters to the Modular X, the only thing left to do is to save this pedal board as a new version of the current pedal board. I'll click the Save As icon, add a name, and then press Enter. Now let's take a look at how you can start a pedal board from scratch. Let's start with a brand new pedal board. In this particular case, I'd like to build a custom synth. To play the synth, I've connected a sequencer via the USB input on the back of the Modular X. So one of the first things I'll need is a generator. So I'll go to the generator section and choose one of the modules. I'll start with the distro. I'll connect the MIDI input to the distro and the audio output to my stereo gain output, which is connected to the output of the Modular X. That sounds fine, but it's a monophonic synth, and I know that the notes that I've created in my sequencer are polyphonic, so I'm going to use a polyphonic module. In this case, I'll take the AM synth instead. I'll delete the distro synth by clicking on the icon, and then I'll load another synth simply by dragging and dropping it into the area. In this case, I take the AM synth, and I'll connect it in the same fashion, connecting up the MIDI and the audio outputs. This sounds much more to my liking, but what I'd like to do is have a custom synth which plays various sounds from different synthesizer modules. So I'm going to add another synthesizer module to this pedal board. And as you can see, it's as simple as that. I've connected these two different modules and they're playing in unison together. But what I would really like to do is to differentiate between the two sounds. And for this, I'm going to use a utility module, the crossfader. The crossfader allows me to fade between the two different sounds smoothly. I'll disconnect the two synths from the stereo gain and reconnect them to the crossfader first, and then connect the crossfader back to the stereo gain. So far so good, but what I'd like to do now is add some effects to each of the synthesizers. I'd like to add a delay to one of them and a reverb to the other. I'll navigate to the delay category and choose a delay. I'll reconnect the AM synth first. As the next step, I'll choose a plate reverb and connect that to the other synth. Now both synths have two different effects. So when I use the crossfade, we get two interesting sounds, one with a delay and one with a plate reverb. I'd like to expand on the idea of using a crossfader. This time, I'm going to choose another two effects, a shimmer reverb and a tremolo module. What I'd like to do in this case is send the audio that comes out of the first crossfader into the second crossfader, where I can decide the blend between the audio signal that's going through the shimmer reverb and the audio signal that's going through the tremolo. So that seems to work pretty well. The only issue is at the moment I'm controlling everything using my mouse on the computer. So it's time to map the parameters that I think are important for me to use on this pedal board to the Modular X. It's a very straightforward process as you've seen before. With all my parameters mapped, the final thing to do is to save this pedal board. I'll click save and give it a name. The pedal board is now saved in my pedal boards library. As a final step, I'd like to load this into the Modular X. I'll create a special bank for this called MySynths, and then select the pedal boards that I wish to transfer to the Modular X, and drag them into the center space. As soon as I disconnect the Modular X from the web browser, this new bank will now be available on the Modular X, along with my pedal boards that I loaded within the bank.